Hi everyone, Pathany Twatano here, the internet's busiest music nerd, and it's time for a review of this new Drake playlist, More Life. Drake, rapper, singer, songwriter, entertainer, Champagne Papi himself, is back with a new playlist. Yes, not an album, not a mixtape, it's a playlist, but what seems to be provided here is all original material. It's 22 tracks. Why not an album? Why not a mixtape? I'm not entirely sure. I mean, after listening to this thing and looking at some of the marketing behind this project, it seems like Drake and his label are resorting to semantic, cheap PR tactics to get people talking about an otherwise nondescript collection of tracks that sound like leftovers from Drake's last album, Views. Sorry for just coming out with my opinion right there and not really giving a deep introduction or some context to the review here, but that's just how I feel. Now, if I look at More Life though with a little less cynicism, I could kind of see what Drake was going for on this one. You have a bunch of tracks that feel like leftovers, or at least like they were created within the same mindset that many of the tracks on Views were. Some loose ideas here and there, tracks that sound barely finished, but still there's some decent ideas at the core of some of these tracks, but they're too short and they're too rough around the edges to just release them as an album. So just kind of fill them out with some half-hearted verses and just copy and paste a couple choruses and some instrumental loops. Just pad out the song until you reach at least the 2 or the 3 minute mark. Then after that, you just string it all together and make sure all the tracks you're featuring have a kind of moody, nocturnal vibe to them, alternating here and there between kind of very cold, skeletal, trap-flavored hip-hop to the sort of whitewashed dance hall that Drake has popularized over the past few years. What Drake has done here is seamless enough to create this consistent, coherent vibe, but it's also varied enough to feel like you're not listening to the same thing over and over. In a way, Drake, I think, is doing something really smart on More Life. He's noticing the way his fans, the way mainstream pop and hip-hop listeners consume music. A lot of listeners out there are looking more for a feeling than they are something concrete or engaging in their music. Something enjoyable, but disposable. You know, it's entertaining enough and sweet on the ears enough to create a nice ambiance, but there's nothing really about it that sort of grabs your attention, forces you to focus on it. And again, I think it's really smart. Drake is answering this silent demand for more passive music. The demand is already there. I think there are a lot of artists who are already serving it. I mean, what most people would call mumble rappers these days. But I think most mainstream artists wouldn't at least admit to pursuing this because, you know, their ego might get in the way. They don't want to publicly say, hey, this project is just, you know, disposable nonsense. No, most people are more focused on creating their next hit, creating their next classic. They want to be that guy. They want to be successful. And that's why I think that even though Drake is releasing More Life over here, I don't think he's like putting all of his chips on this. You know, he's not hedging his bets on this thing. I mean, that is evidenced in that he named this a playlist and not an album. That alone is going to make periodicals and music fans put less of an emphasis on what he's doing here. And since there's nothing really essential about what's going on More Life, fans will either enjoy it while it's on and just kind of move on to something else when something better replaces it, or they just won't hold it against Drake if some of the material on this thing is mediocre, because at the end of the day, More Life is just kind of a glorified B-sides collection, whether listeners realize it or not. There's some decent moments on this thing, but typically it boils down to a single verse from Drake, or one of the beats are okay, or maybe the hook is kind of alright. Tracks like Free Smoke and Galchester. Can't Have Everything, KMT. I love Sampha's performance on the track 4422. Also, I like Skepta's appearance on the Skepta interlude. These are more of the hard-hitting tracks in the track listing here, more of the hip-hop centric tracks in the track listing here. Of course, on this album, even though he is about as Jamaican as a box of Kraft Dinner, Drake continues to deliver that, you know, dance hall sound, this boring whitewashed Toronto dance hall that doesn't really sound much at all like real regular dancehall. And now that Drake is palling around with all of these rappers from the UK, he seems comfortable in rapping now in an English accent, which happens on the song No Long Talk, where he's kind of putting, you know, a little bit of that English twang on some of his vowels on his bars here, and then he mixes that with his fake patois, and then it's just an unholy matrimony of horror. You know, Drake rapping about his tings. So while there are some highlights on this thing, there are also moments that, even though this record overall is very much smooth sonic wallpaper, when you pay deeper attention to it, there are some baffling moments, like the song Teenage Fever. Most of this track is just a sung rendition of the hook from J-Lo's If You Had My Love. Like, how Drake could take credit for this, I don't know. On the song Glow, Kanye's feature is really eccentric. It's loud, it's in your face. His singing and Drake's singing intertwine in a really ugly way. While I appreciate that Kanye kind of gave it his all on this track, I feel like his performance here doesn't really fit with the overall vibe of the playlist. The song Ice Melts is a reggae flip with a pretty good instrumental, an interesting Young Thug feature, but I was kind of floored by just how demo quality and flat the mix sounded on this thing. And the song Get It Together features all of these bad driving dance rhythms that I could only expect to hear in like the dumbest, drunkest bar in the downtown area of some random city that has nothing else interesting going on other than this really crappy DJ night that this beat came from. Not only that, but Drake barely feels like a feature or a major presence on this track. And this is actually one of a handful of moments on this record where Drake is almost like a non-entity on his own playlist. I keep wanting to say album, but playlist. And I think the track Fake Love still sounds like Drake trying to write a second Hotline Bling, but failing miserably. You know, I mean, Drake and his team can call this whatever the hell they want, but in my opinion, what this is how not to do a B-sides collection. You know, I can sort of appreciate the concept of what is attempted here, and maybe releasing this thing might end up making sense in terms of dollars and cents, when all of the profits and losses are added up and the bottom line is there. But what Drake has done here on More Life makes for really uninspired art, and just shows that Drake doesn't think twice about trying to make a profit off of his cutting room floor, or at least just a relative lack of effort. You know, there's really nothing special about these tracks on an individual level, but that's kind of the point. Nothing's really supposed to steal the show, steal your attention. It's supposed to be this long, uniform experience. Every track is supposed to reinforce the next. And I appreciate the vibe. I like this project as a vibe, but it's only really so good at that. Overall, I'm pretty indifferent to this thing. And while I do think More Life is a better listening experience than Views, it's only by virtue of it just being less offensive, less crappy, having less terrible moments on it, and more so-so moments on it. I'm feeling a light to decent 5 on this thing.
Transition. Did you give this playlist a listen? Did you love it? Did you hate it? What would you rate it? You're the best. You're the best. What should I review next? Hit the like if you like. Please subscribe, and please don't die so you can continue watching my reviews. Drake, More Life, forever.